What is up, guys? So for this video I want to discuss and analyze the season premiere of season 4 of Better Call Saul. Alright, real quick before I start this review, I just want to apologize for not posting this video sooner. I had some logistical issues which prevented me from making this video immediately following the season premiere, but in the coming weeks I will definitely try to get this review up right after the new episode airs. Alright, without further ado, let's talk about the season premiere of season 4 of Better Call Saul. Okay, so like the first 3 seasons of Better Call Saul so far, this first episode of season 4 also started in the exact same fashion, with a flash forward cold opening scene of Gene in Omaha, which picked up with a direct continuation of the opening scene from last season. In this opening scene, we saw Gene being taken to the hospital by the paramedics, where we learned that his collapse was not the result of a serious medical condition. This was then followed by the scene of Gene at the hospital that had been teased prior to season 4, where there seemed to be an issue with Gene's driver's license as well as his social security number. However, in this scene, we learned that these perceived problems were just an error in transposition by the woman who worked at the hospital. This scene was then followed by what in my opinion was the most compelling scene of the season premiere, which displayed a scene of Gene leaving the hospital in a cab where he noticed that the cab driver of this cab had an Albuquerque Isotopes emblem hanging from his rearview mirror. This realization by Gene was then followed by this cab driver, who was likely from Albuquerque based on the context of this scene, giving Gene some not so subtle glances in his rearview mirror, most likely due to the fact that he recognized that Gene was Saul Goodman. These glances then led Gene to exit the cab prior to his intended destination, seemingly due to the fact that he thought that his true identity had been compromised. So, taking these plot details into consideration, this opening scene truly epitomized the constant fear that Gene must be living with in Omaha of his true identity being discovered, which would of course, as a result, lead to his arrest. With this being said, due to the fact that Saul Goodman was an extremely notorious man in Albuquerque to say the least.
Hi, I'm Saul Goodman. Did you know that you have rights? The Constitution says you do.
I think this opening scene of the first episode of season 4 is teasing the fact that it's only a matter of time until Gene's true identity is in fact discovered. Furthermore, based on the fact that Vince Gilligan also stated earlier this year that we could see a lot more of Gene this season, I think this opening scene will not be the only time we see Gene in season 4. Following this cold opening scene, the first act of this episode started with a plot development scene where it was revealed how Jimmy and Kim learned about Chuck's death from Howard. Interestingly, in this scene, we saw Jimmy and Kim arrive at Chuck's house after the fire department had already put out the fire and after Chuck's body had already been taken away by the coroner, which in my opinion was a rather tasteful way to display the aftermath of Chuck's death, which also made this scene focus more on the emotions that Jimmy was experiencing in the scene rather than the grotesque nature of the scene. Following Act 1, Act 2 of this episode then opened with the scene of Mike on his last day on the job at SMQ Parking, as a result of him now working for Gus Fring via his employment at Madrigal. In this scene, following Mike leaving his daughter-in-law's house, we then saw Mike receive his first paycheck in the mail from Madrigal, which as a result foreshadowed Mike's plot that would ensue later in this episode. The second scene of Act 2 then featured a scene of Jimmy receiving a phone call from Howard regarding Chuck's obituary. In this scene, we could see that this phone call where Howard read Chuck's obituary to Jimmy appeared to take somewhat of an emotional toll on Jimmy, which is seemingly understandable due to the many emotions that Jimmy must have been experiencing in this scene. These emotions, of course, would take a very intriguing turn during the last scene of this episode. Following the conclusion of the second act, Act 3 of this episode featured the scene that was teased prior to season 4 of the scene that displayed what happened immediately following Hector's collapse, which we discovered in this episode was the result of a stroke. Following this scene, we then saw a scene of Nacho, Arturo, Gus, and Juan Bolsa at the Los Pollos Hermanos distribution center, where we saw that Nacho seemed rather panicked immediately prior to speaking to Juan Bolsa, seemingly due to his fear of being discovered as the one who tried to kill Hector. We then saw Nacho's fear somewhat subside when it was revealed that Juan Bolsa just wanted to delegate more responsibility to Nacho and Arturo in the aftermath of Hector's stroke and did not want to question Nacho regarding his potential culpability. Following Nacho and Arturo leaving the vicinity, we then heard Juan Bolsa speak with Gus about the fallout of Hector's stroke as well, where Gus states that someone will likely try to move in against the Salamancas during this period of chaos, which could as a result bring war, which seems very likely based on the apparent conflicts with the cartel that have been teased to us prior to season 4. Furthermore, another part of Gus Fring's dialogue in the scene that really intrigued me was the fact that a drug war would of course also bring the DEA into the equation. As I have speculated at length prior to season 4, I wonder if this plot involving the cartel could finally bring Hank Schrader and Steve Gomez into the plot of Better Call Saul this season. Additionally, as a side note, what I also found rather thought-provoking about the scene in Act 3 was the manipulation of the timeline that occurred in the scene, which effectively made the scene a flashback due to the placement of this scene in this episode. Following these two conversations in this scene, we then saw a scene of Nacho disposing the evidence of his attempted murder against Hector in a river. However, in a shocking revelation, it was revealed in the scene that Gus Fring's enforcer Victor had been tailing Nacho and saw Nacho dispose of these pills in the river. So with all these plot details being taken into consideration, I will be very curious to see how Gus will react if and when he definitively learns that Nacho was the one who tried to murder Hector. As I have discussed in depth in many of my previous videos, it does appear that Gus Fring's reaction to this revelation of Nacho's actions against Hector is certainly going to be a key part of this plot this season. Following the conclusion of Act 3, the final act of this episode opened with a rather mysterious scene of an unknown man helping a young child with his broken bike chain. While I was initially rather perplexed by this rather cryptic scene, it was then revealed to us that Mike stole this man's ID badge in order to gain access into Madrigal as part of an elaborate plan in order to test the security of Madrigal's warehouse, which as a side note appeared to be the same warehouse we first saw in Season 5 of Breaking Bad in the episode entitled 51. Following Mike revealing this information about the weaknesses of Madrigal's security protocol to a manager who was rather puzzled by who Mike was and why Mike was telling him this information, Mike then responded by stating to this manager that he is a security consultant and that the manager should call corporate and ask for Lydia Radar Quayle. So with this being said, I will be very curious to see the aftermath of this scene in the next episode of Better Call Saul in regards to why Mike seemingly did this action on his own accord and what will be Lydia's as well as Gus's response if this was in fact a severe breach of protocol. Following this scene, the next scene of Act 4 then displayed a scene of Chuck's funeral that had been teased prior to Season 4. In this scene, we saw Gene receive condolences from many of the people who Chuck knew in the past who also knew Jimmy, including Clifford Maine, Rich Schweigert, Brian Archuleta, and Brenda, the HHM secretary, who in spite of all the differences they may have had with Jimmy, showed him nothing but the utmost level of respect during this trying time. As a side note, even though Jimmy did not interact with Chuck's ex-wife Rebecca at Chuck's funeral in this episode, I have speculated in a previous video that the money that is owed to Chuck will play a significant role in the plot this season, so I think this will not be the last time we see Rebecca in the plot of Better Call Saul in Season 4. Following Chuck's funeral, we then saw a scene of Jimmy and Kim drive back to Kim's apartment, where they then saw Howard sitting on the side of the road waiting for them. This was then followed by Howard telling Jimmy and Kim at Kim's apartment about the fallout of Chuck's death, including the plot involving the insurance premiums of HHM, which led Howard to believe that he was responsible for Chuck taking his own life. With this being said, what was incredibly compelling about this scene was that following this revelation and the emotional toll it clearly took on Howard, Jimmy states to Howard in an almost tongue-in-cheek manner, quote, "Well, Howard, I guess that's your cross to bear," which in my opinion seemed very similar to the off-the-cuff one-liners which Saul Goodman would utter in Breaking Bad. This revelation by Howard was then followed by a chipper and jovial Jimmy, who clearly was in a much better mood following Howard's revelation, to which we can see Kim is rather perplexed by. Of course, unbeknownst to both Kim and Howard is the fact that it was Jimmy who effectively caused the insurance premiums of HHM to rise in Season 3 of Better Call Saul in the episode entitled Expenses. So with all of these plot details from the first episode of Season 4 being taken into consideration, in my opinion, I thought this was an absolutely incredible episode to start off Season 4, which also left us with a tremendous number of cliffhangers heading into Episode 2, including the question of will we see more of Gene this season, what comes next for Nacho and Gus following the revelation that Victor saw Nacho discard the pills, what will be the fallout of Mike's plot at Madrigal, and what is next for Jimmy, Kim, and Howard following all of the formalities of the aftermath of Chuck's death being completed, all of which I cannot wait to see unfold next week. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any new videos about the 4th season of Better Call Saul. As always, my name is Anton Jackson. Thanks again for watching.